Good afternoon, members of the media, wider viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to the Ministry of National Security this afternoon. And at this joint press conference, I have with me my colleague, Major General Retired Edmund Dillon, who we're all familiar with. And I would turn it straight over to my colleague, Major General Retired Dillon, for him to start, and then I will take it up after.
Pleasant good afternoon to members of the media and the listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. Let me thank you very much for coming out to this press conference this afternoon. And this press conference is truly to address the issue that was raised at the United National Congress political platform Monday Night Forum at the constituency of East Oropouche last evening. In particular, issues raised by one Mr. Carlton Denny. In that situation last evening, one can recall the words of Mr. Carlton Denny. But let us first of all deal with who is Mr. Carlton Denny. And I know for a fact that the wider population is aware that the Prime Minister held a press conference this morning and he treated with several of the issues. But I want to again talk about who is Carlton Denny. Carlton Denny, as he really articulated last evening, comes from the village of Point Fortin, my constituency. He's in fact from Point Lego, Point Fortin. He also was a member of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, in particular the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment, where he served for about 12 to 14 years. Having moved from the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, he then gained employment at the Strategic Services Agency. Carlton Denny was then a very respectable young man. However, last evening, and I want to say to the general public, last evening when I sat in front of my television and I looked at Carlton Denny on the podium at the United National Congress Monday Night Forum, I was in fact ashamed that Carlton Denny was a soldier of the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment. As a matter of fact, this morning I had several calls from former and serving members of the regiment, and the Defense Force in particular, who couldn't understand a person who left at the rank of corporal, who had several trainings and could address the Honourable Prime Minister, and if you looked at the Express, I can quote. He said, "I remind Rowley and the then Minister Dillon that this country was such and such and such," as he said. There was no term of respect. They showed a lack of discipline for someone who had gone through training in the Defense Force. So a number of former and service Defense Force personnel called this morning aghast that someone can go on a political platform and address the Honourable Prime Minister by his first name as Rowley, a former Chief of Defense Staff as Dillon. It shows blatant disrespect for someone who have gone through that training. But who again is Carlton Denny? And the Prime Minister went at length to show some of his performance report in terms of insubordination, in terms of propensity to lead unrest within certain environment. The individual Carlton Denny went on to show that he continued a pattern of disrespect. But when you look at it last evening, there were two items, two issues that came to the front. One, desperation on the part of the United National Congress. And you see that desperation increasing as we move towards the local general election. And you see it increasing as we move to general election. Last Monday, there was someone again that they brought on, particularly to deal with the Prime Minister. This Monday, they had someone to treat with the Prime Minister and myself as the Minister of National Security. So there's a bit of desperation. And on Denny's side, of course, there's a bit of ambition. Because he has always been an ambitious individual. To the extent where in the Defense Force, we provided him with several training courses to further his education. And there's some question with him. Even at an examination that he did at the John Donaldson Technical Institute, it was not investigated, but we know that there were some issues there with him, attaining a certain kind of grade. That's just before he left the Defense Force. So we're looking at the kind of individual that we're treating with, who went on the political platform last evening to denounce and speak certain kind of things with respect to the Prime Minister myself. And in particular, he spoke about, and it's quoted here, he said that in this country, every creed and race must find an equal place. And I told them, referring to the Prime Minister and myself, I told them, no, I'm not fighting any Indians. He said, alluded to the population, that the Minister of National Security, myself then, and the Prime Minister almost instructed them to fire all Indians in the Strategic Services Agency. I have never had that conversation with Mr. Carlton Denny. And I know for a fact the Prime Minister never had such conversation. As a matter of fact, he also alluded that he attended the National Security Council as the Minister of National Security between 2015 and 2018. I'm the person who then responsible for ensuring that the technical advisors, the Commissioner of Police, the Chief of Defense Staff, Commissioner of Prisons, the Director of the Strategic Service Agency, attend the National Security Council meeting. So the first screening comes from the Minister of National Security. At no time, during my tenure, did Carlton Denny attended any national security conference whatsoever. So again, you can see he is in fact telling vast untruth that he attended and spoke to the then Prime Minister, spoke to the present Prime Minister with respect to the National Security Council meeting. He never attended, in no capacity. The only individual who attended from the Strategic Service Agency was in fact the director, who from time to time would have attended meetings of the National Security Council. So Carlton Denny is in fact was being carried away on the political platform to tell vast untruth. He went on again to speak about this app that he had, that he came to Minister Dillon about. This VIPO, Virtual Police Interface, he spoke to about. Ladies and gentlemen, this same VIPO system that he spoke about, correspondence here will tell you that it was presented to the then government in 2014. In 2014, it was presented to the government under Mr. Kamala Bissessar, and it went nowhere. Well, Mr. Denny did come to me as Minister of National Security, and I said to him, first and foremost, there is a conflict of interest as far as I'm concerned. The reason being, he was trying to sell the agency, that system, and a cost of $5 to $6 million. I said there's a conflict of interest. You are working with a Strategic Service Agency, and you're trying to sell us a system that you have developed, and I'm sure some of the time you used to develop was based on the Strategic Services time. So that time spent was based on the time that you were paid for, and you're trying to sell us that system. Additionally, when I examined the concept of the system, it's in fact slightly advanced system of the 555 program. So that, and at that time, under Commissioner Williams, they were looking at a similar system that was much cheaper and much readily available on the market, and Commissioner Williams was looking at that. So I told him that there is nowhere based on the conflict of interest and the cost of what you're providing for us that I'm interested in that VIPO device. So ladies and gentlemen, when he presented it last evening, it was not a first time as though it's something that is new to the United National Congress. It was presented to the National Security Council under the then Prime Minister in 2014, and it went nowhere. So it wasn't the first time. Don't let him believe that this was the first time. So I'm saying that to show that Mr. Carlton Denny has a track record of being insubordinate, or being ill-disciplined, or having his own way. And there's another area that I cannot talk about, but there's something in 2015 that was discovered of a highly sensitive nature that led to his termination, of a highly national security matter that I cannot go into any details. It was a combination of his performance, a combination of issues surrounding Mr. Carlton Denny, that he was terminated in 2015. As a matter of fact, the day when he was terminated, there is a video that I can provide showing Mr. Carlton Denny actually jumping the fence of strategic agency when they tried to retake some of the systems, the cell phones and other devices from him, which he's supposed to turn over. He actually jumped the fence and ran out of the Strategic Services Agency. And this gentleman now is coming to the public to tell us, as though he is better than anyone, he's had a track record where he's ill-disciplined, insubordinate, and his performance lacks a lot. And therefore, he was terminated based on performance and based on an issue of very sensitive nature. He could not continue in a highly sensitive organization as a Strategic Service Agency. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much.
Thank you, my cabinet colleague, Minister Dillon. There is very little that I can personally add with respect to Carlton Denny, because the truth is, until that newspaper report this morning that I read at 2 a.m. this morning, I did not even know of the gentleman's existence. When we came into government in 2015, I was appointed to sit on the National Security Council. Minister Dillon was then the Minister of National Security, and I can confirm without fear of contradiction that at no point in time did this Mr. Denny appear before the National Security Council, make any presentation, or have any interface with us whatsoever. He also never served as a director of the Strategic Services Agency in any capacity whatsoever. He was an employee. The only person in law who can fire or hire anyone at the SSA is the Director of Strategic Services Agency. So his story does not even make sense from that aspect. In addition to what the Honourable Prime Minister has provided you all with this morning, when he referenced a couple secret documents, and to what Minister Dillon has told you all here this afternoon, I have been provided with an order from the High Court of Trinidad and Tobago dated June 2017 in a lawsuit brought by one Carlton Denny against the Minister of National Security and the Strategic Services Agency, where Mr. Denny's lawsuit against the SSA was dismissed. And Mr. Denny now owes the SSA sums of money. There was an order for cost brought against him. What is interesting is who Mr. Denny's lawyers are. It's a certain chambers called Freedom Law Chambers. And I'll invite you all to go and see who is the head of Freedom Law Chambers and who operates out of Freedom Law Chambers, and to ask that particular senior counsel, a former Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, whether he himself is not in criminal jeopardy and not before the criminal courts with criminal charges against him. But amazingly, he is the attorney at law representing this person that I've now found out is a person whose character has come into question before, as far back as 2009, as the Prime Minister pointed out to you all this morning, and as Minister Dillon has just reaffirmed, where there were claims of insubordination. I'd like to move away from this individual now, because as I say, I've never met him. I wouldn't be able to identify him. Never came across him once before in any incarnation whilst I've been a Minister of Government and serving on the National Security Council, or now since I took over from Minister Dillon as the Minister of National Security. I want to just spend a quick few moments on the role of a Minister of National Security, because you see, the opposition is selling their Cambridge Analytica politics, and they're going with certain buzzwords out there, and they're claiming crime in Trinidad and Tobago. We're all concerned about crime, and they're making allegations about me as the office holder of Minister of National Security. And I saw Mr. Denny write on script, utilizing the script that they provided him with in that same newspaper report. But I also saw the video of him last night as he said, Stuart Young Ministry and Stuart Young Police Service. Stuart Young has no ministry, and I certainly have no police service. The Minister of National Security and every prior Minister of National Security has certain roles and responsibilities. Minister Dillon, even your current Commissioner of Police, Gary Griffith, when he was the Minister of National Security, and all prior Ministers of National Security, on a daily basis, we get security briefings and reports. It is part of the role of the Minister of National Security to be apprised of what is the situation taking place 24/7 in Trinidad and Tobago, be it a natural disaster, be it inclement incoming weather, be it issues of crime taking place, be it issues that we've picked up through intelligence of what may be taking place. So as the Minister of National Security, I get both written briefs, I get oral briefings, and I get reports. What I can tell the population of Trinidad and Tobago is, and I'm observing the opposition carrying it out right now, the opposition are particularly worried. There's certain members of the opposition. In fact, the member for Oropouche East spent a lot of time last night preparing himself. He keeps talking about what is going on in crime and what is going on in Trinidad and Tobago with action taken by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. There are 2 points that I want to make very clearly here today to the population of Trinidad and Tobago. As the Minister of National Security, I have never interfered in any police investigation. I can say that without fear of contradiction. And I can give the assurance to the public of Trinidad and Tobago that once I'm in the portfolio of Minister of National Security, or whatever other portfolio I may hold or not hold, I will never interfere in any police investigation. They are raising the issue of former Minister Marlene McDonald and trying to make, well, not trying, they're suggesting that I had prior information with respect to charges that were about to be laid or an investigation into Minister Marlene McDonald. The charges were subsequently laid against her. I can say here now, without fear of any contradiction, that I had no prior knowledge whatsoever with respect to the police investigation into former Minister McDonald. That's point number one. What I can tell you here now as well, without fear of contradiction, as the Minister of National Security, I am aware that there are members, both past and present, of the UNC opposition in Trinidad and Tobago who are interfacing with the criminal element in Trinidad and Tobago. I warned about this a few months ago. At the time, Dr. Munilal and others jumped out. There was a particular platform. I think it was Ms. Jerlene John was in charge of the platform that night. And a certain individual was on the platform speaking on a UNC platform. And it subsequently became known that he had a host of criminal charges and even convictions against him. I warned the population then. They questioned how I would know that and if I interfered in police work, etc. I can say without fear of contradiction here today, and I'm putting the population of Trinidad and Tobago on warning again, there are members of the current opposition, some who sit as parliamentarians, who have been interfacing and communicating with the criminal elements in Trinidad and Tobago. And there is also the suggestion that there are those who are associated with the opposition but are no longer in Parliament, some who may actually be before the criminal courts, who are doing likewise. This is a very disturbing occurrence for me as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago and as a member of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And lastly, and not least, as a Minister of National Security in Trinidad and Tobago. There's a saying, I learned it in primary school, and it is a truism. The empty barrel makes the most noise. Population, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, fellow citizens, look on as we go into 2 elections coming up and look at the people who are making the most noise from the opposition side and question why, and remember this conversation I've had with you all here today. So I condemn what took place on the platform last night. Minister Dillon, as a former Chief of Defense Staff, which is the highest office that an officer can reach, leading the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force with the highest level of integrity, to have a junior officer and to hear that he was the rank of a corporal today, calling him by name Dillon, calling the Prime Minister by name Rowley, with absolutely no respect. He has done a great disservice to himself and to the institutions he once was a part of. I can say this as well. No intelligence officer anywhere in any intelligence service in the world breaks their code of secrecy, confidentiality, and also their oath to office, the way that we've seen done there. And we condemn his actions. There's absolutely no truth to the race allegation that is being played out on a UNC platform. We condemn it in the strongest possible terms. There's no truth to it whatsoever. At no point in time was Mr. Denny or anyone, Minister Dillon or the Prime Minister, given any instructions to fire any race of people in the SSA, not under this administration. If you go and check the records, you will see that there was a cleansing, and I'll call it that, of the SSA between 2010 and 2015. And when we came in as an administration, and up to this day, we're still dealing with the litigation coming out of that cleansing that took place, that is costing taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago money, as officers were fired without cause between 2010 and 2015. I take pride in saying that under Minister Dillon's tenure as the Minister of National Security and under mine now, that did not happen at the Strategic Services Agency. Members of the media, thank you all very much for your time here this afternoon. And I'm sure Minister Dillon and myself can take a few questions restricted to what we've spoken about here this afternoon.
Minister Young, you just referred to the gentleman, Mr. Denny, saying that he went up on a platform and spoke secrets, well, alleged secrets, things that would have happened during his time at the SSA. I'm not sure what is the procedure, but did he not have to sign some type of non-disclosure, I don't know, some type of secrecy document? And if so, was that breached, and could some action be taken?
I don't think we will be wasting any further time with Mr. Denny. As far as we see it, he has already done himself a disservice. But yes, every officer in the SSA, as part of their contract of employment, there is specific terminology to deal with confidentiality and secrecy and keeping state secrets. You all would recall that when we came into office, I think it was in a parliamentary debate and thereafter, I had made certain allegations about certain equipment being dismantled and destroyed that we had found out about. When we came into office, persons came and told us that, for example, face recognition equipment and servers, if you go back and check the Hansard, you would see I referred to that very earlier clock. This gentleman had something to do with that.
And given these allegations against Mr. Denny, are you willing to say if you believe the SSA's function was compromised during the tenure of the previous government?
Without fear of contradiction, yes, the SSA's job and performance was compromised under the former administration. I've just repeated that again. Certain software was dismantled and it made absolutely no sense why it was dismantled. Certain servers were taken off. Made no sense to us why you would take those things off if you're really serious in the fight against criminality in Trinidad.
Minister Young, you made mention to the litigation that has been brought against the government with regard to the former SSA officers. Would you be able to disclose, the amount of money that has been dispensed with regard to those litigation actions at this time?
I don't have that information at hand, sorry.
You also mentioned the action that Mr. Denny had brought, and he has money owing the SSA. Do you have that figure?
I do. It was a decision given by the Honourable Madam Justice Margaret Mohammed, dated the 22nd of June 2017, upon the matter coming up for case management conference and upon hearing attorneys at law for the claimant and attorneys at law for the defendant, the claimant being Mr. Denny. It is ordered that the court strikes out the second defendant, that's the Strategic Services Agency, as a party. So they were struck out, and that Mr. Denny is to pay SSA costing the sum of $4,600.
Minister Young, you alluded to a relationship between members of the opposition and known criminal elements. I know you can't give any specifics or names or anything like that, but can you tell me a little bit more about the nature of the relationship? Is it for financing? Is it for a relationship perhaps with gang members or alleged relationships?
I can't provide any further information, but I find it very interesting, the examples that you asked about, and why you would think that those are the examples to which I've referred. You have a glass crystal ball.
Those were just from the top of my head. Nothing deeper into that.
All right? Okay. Thank you all members of the media very much.
Thank you very much.